What's up, guys? We got a game against Joshua 76, 2040 from Germany. This was a really close, tense game up until the point that I had 1 minute on my clock, and then it got infinitely more tense into a crazy endgame, which 1 minute is hardly adequate for. Then crazy things started happening, so. Um, and then I mouse slipped to lose the game, unfortunately, but it's okay. So let's go through the game. He starts off with the knight developing. I go d6. Um, so now he basically has the queen's gambit pawns, and I'm playing the king's Indian structure with d6 and g6. He goes g3. I Fianchetto, he Fianchettos. We both castle. And now I develop my knight to d7, because if I go to c6 and he kicks me, I don't have a square that I like for my knight. So we go here, preparing an e5 pawn push. He develops his knight, and we just push e5. If if we're allowed to without a negative consequence, we just do it. He goes e4, and now we have this standoff, which is pretty common in the King's Indian. So you could take, but you don't have to take. I go c6, another kind of standard move, opening some space for the queen, also controlling his knight. It's also extra protection for certain things, like takes. The knight can't jump in. He swings the rook over, increases its activity, so it makes a lot of sense. Also, maybe he's not sure exactly where he wants to put his bishop, probably here. I go queen to c7. It just lends extra support to the e5 square, and it gets out of the d file. He goes h3, so that I never have an eventual bishop g4 or knight g4. And by doing this, it's a lot harder for me to find a place for my light squared bishop. So I develop my rook instead. By putting it on e8, I'm not only over defending the e5 pawn, but in case I'm taking, I now have a semi-open file for my rook hitting his e4 pawn. It also opens up the f8 square, which is important because in lots of lines, I suppose, the knight or the bishop use these squares. It's always helpful to have it open, available, in case one of your pieces wants to use it. Bishop goes to e3, developing his final minor piece. Meanwhile, my guy's stuck here, not developing anytime soon. So I go a5. I'm just trying to claim a little space on the queen side. And then I can proceed with my plan from there. Like, if you go back, I mean, I could go maybe knight f8. As I mentioned, you can use this square. I could probably take, but I go a5 to create some space, and I could do one of those things next. I just wanted to see what he does. He goes queen d2. Yes, he can create this battery, but I don't see how that's a big deal. He doesn't have a real attacking setup here. I'm not worried about it. So now I take, it opens up my rook, it opens up my bishop, it opens up a square for my knight. So now I'm ready. I mean, I could have taken it at any point, but now I'm very, you know, well prepared. I have everything in its rightful place. Here he captures with the bishop, which is a little weird. I expected the knight. I feel like knight is more natural, but maybe he just wants to put it here, saying, you know, if you ever move your knight, I'll trade immediately. But I'm not going to move my knight. Why would I? Instead, I'm using the square I just opened up for my piece to improve my d7 knight. So now I don't have to go back to f8 and then here. I can immediately move it into the center. Of course, this allows trades, but I'm fine with trades. Okay, so I move my knight in. It hits a pawn. Maybe he didn't want to defend, so he takes the piece. But now I get to take back with the pawn, which hits the bishop with the tempo and puts a pawn in the center for me. And so in this pawn structure, I have this square as an outpost for my pieces, but he doesn't have this square because of my c-pawn. So that should be a good thing for me. He moves his bishop out of the attack and tries to keep it active on my side of the board, but it's also vulnerable potentially. I develop my last minor piece to e6, comes with a threat, and it opens up the way for my rook to win another tempo. So it's just tempo after tempo for me. Now he defends the pawn, and now I bring in the rook with tempo, and I was happy with my position. He moves the queen out of the way, obviously, while creating a secret threat, or not so secret threat, of this. Maybe you could move the queen, but this knight is kind of misplaced here, I feel like, because this pressure doesn't actually matter, I don't think. And you normally, maybe you want to watch this square, but you have the pawn, so you don't need to, because the pawn is almighty. So I moved it here, which hits the bishop and defends this square simultaneously. And I think the knight should be moving towards this circuit of squares anyway, as a rerouting. Yeah, so now he gets his bishop out of the way, but he keeps it on this diagonal as active as he can. But now I see that my Fianchetto bishop is staring into pawns. It's not going to go this way. So I might as well activate my bishop and deactivate his. He trades. Now, you could take with 3 different pieces. I took with the king, but it makes sense to take with the knight, because I've been wanting to put my knight here, so it makes sense to get it to f8 so it can reroute there quickly. But I took with the king. Maybe I wanted to keep the c5 square covered, I don't remember. Now he swings the rook over, and I go king g7. I just immediately remove any options of his queen coming in here. I mean, he doesn't have a dark square bishop, but even so, I felt like it's a good solidifying move. You know, it could help defend a knight here. It just felt good, like a good controlling move. He goes to double, I'm assuming. And so black doesn't have any moves that really make sense, like very few moves, so it's, I mean, yeah, it's easy, like you don't want to push, that's a mistake, that's a mistake, that's a mistake, Yeah, so there's not that many plans, but what I want to do is get my knight into here. This way. So I started its long journey. He doubles. I take. He takes with the queen. And he takes with, the reason he takes with the queen is to double stack so that I can't swing my rook over because I lose it. So I know I can't swing my rook over, but I can go rook e7 and then swing it over. So he tries to improve the knight since it was covered by the pawn, and he figures that now this square looks pretty decent. I mean, it does look pretty decent. But this gives me time to move my rook over, hit the queen, and force a trade of rooks. So he has to respond. And now I take his rook, he has to take back. And so again, we're playing this endgame where my knight can get into here, and his knight can't get into here. So that's what I'm playing for in this structure. Also, I think his bishop is a little bit worse than mine, but we'll see. So I move my knight in. I moved my knight in to cover this square and this square to counterbalance his knight. But actually, maybe like yeah, this isn't a big deal because after that you can drop back and then maybe go in here. But yeah, b5 immediately would have made sense. Because after b5, you know, he can't take because takes and the knight has nowhere to go but here. I guess I saw this move and didn't like it, but I guess it's not a problem. You just go back and jump in. So I put my knight in here, but now it's hard for me to make progress. I have to play b5, whether I like it or not, at some point. So now he goes h4, maybe starting to tickle my king side, because he doesn't really have anything else to do. And now I play b5, one move later, after this square was covered. I didn't want him as a response to b5 jumping in here. Apparently the computer's saying it was fine, even with letting him, but I wanted to secure that square first and then push b5, just because then that would really force his knight into a tough situation. So yeah, he goes knight b2, and now you don't have to do this, but I feel like h5 is annoying. It's just annoying in general because I don't want to take, and maybe we're playing on the queen side and he, you know, goes to one of these squares to defend or attack something, but it also supports h6. So as I respond on the queen side, his next move is h6. Now my king goes back, and now I have to also worry about back rank stuff. I don't know. When people go h4, h5 is a common response, and vice versa. And it usually is like a proper response. But if you have something more aggressive that works, like they're saying b takes c, then you can just do that. So he goes with the queen onto the dark squares, protecting the knight, protecting everything. I try to improve my piece because I feel like my bishop is where it belongs. My queen should be more active. I need to open up the c file, or, you know, get it here. But takes. Anyway, I try to improve my knight to really here because it didn't have that many good circuits. He just consolidates, he gets a little tighter, queen one move closer to the center, touching all these pawns, protecting it one more time, and attacking this guy, which you have to pay attention to. But this entices me to go b4, blockade these guys, and provide a way to shift the lever and go with a4. He has to move the queen somewhere, and now this gives me the option to force a queen trade. Well, not force, but offer a queen trade. If he doesn't take it like he didn't, then now I'm finally have the file after such a long period of time. But now I'm running low on time, 3 minutes, and my knight's under attack. I don't know, I suppose there's other moves to consider, but I guess moving your knight always lets his queen in, and you can't defend your knight other than with your queen. So I guess this makes the most sense. Queen d6. Now he plays f3, which weakens his king laterally. Also blocks his bishop further. It does defend the pawn, so maybe he wants to move the bishop or something. But I didn't mind seeing that move at all. And now I have this opportunity to go a4. And I saw that if I went a4, he could take with the pawn. And although this pawn is weak, and this pawn is weak, it's not worth sacking a piece. Like, you're not going to take either one with a piece. But what I didn't see is that if you go here and he takes, and you do capture with the knight, and he captures back with the knight, at the end of that you have queen d1 check, and then that's obviously winning. So I didn't see the queen d1 check, so I didn't go for it, and I had a4 in my mind, but then I saw it wasn't possible here, and then it kind of fell out of my mind. Even though I should have played it later. So queen d4. I figure I'm attacking his knight, I'm pinning his queen. He doesn't really have a choice. He has to take. And then I take, and now I get a passed pawn. He tries to move his king over to blockade as fast as possible. Now, I only had 2 minutes and 40 seconds, so I didn't, I knew I couldn't calculate this the way I wanted to determine if I should push or not, and when I should push. And so in my mind, I'm like, I'm low on time. This is a passed pawn. Let me just move my knight out of the way, secure it with c5, then I don't have to worry about it being safe ever. And then I could play with my pieces from then. It turns out you can leave this structure here because he can never actually take this. The king can never approach. And if the knight ever comes to challenge, you can always take in c5. So there's never a threat of actually losing this pawn, even though it looks loose. But I move my knight away so I could play c5. He brings the king forward. I cement it in. He goes here, and I knew he would, and I figured whatever, at least I wasn't gonna lose. So I go f6, which just secures this square from the pawn and the knight, and then I can move my king over. He goes here, applying pressure. I'm saying to him, you know what, the position's closed. If you want to take my bishop, go for it. So I just move my king closer to the center. He doesn't even take, he just shuffles his king. And now I improve my knight into the center, but it looks hard for either side to make progress without blundering. He moves back, and again, the move I should be playing, and the move that slipped my mind because it wasn't possible before, is a4, because if he takes, everything falls. Also, knight and bishop can sack on c4 here, and after they take, you take back with the other piece, and you have this crazy pawn mass with that piece in here, and black's actually better. So that was another option. But I shuffled my king back and forth, completely missing both. I do have a minute on my clock, but both still, especially a4, extremely findable. Especially when you want to do it and then forgot about it. Knight c1, maybe he's trying to finally trade. I just move my king closer. Again, I still have both those other ideas, which I miss. He shuffles his king back and forth. And now I instead of going for the obvious a4, like it's such an obvious move too. G5, starting something over here. He takes. Okay, and I'm one step closer to having an outside pass pawn. Fine. But now he pushes, hitting my knight in the center. I have to take. He takes. Now I have to move my knight. I figure after I move my knight, he's going to jump in. I mean, he's going to push forward and hit my bishop. I don't want my bishop to be locked out. So let me throw in this check and put it past the pawn chain with tempo. He moves his king probably to what he thinks is like a normal square. But now this gives me another tempo with check. He moves his king. He has to move his king because look. You can't go here because it's not legal, right? These actually walk into discoveries. But you can't go here because you lose the bishop to a fork. So you have to, whether you like it or not, walk into the discovery. Oh no. Yeah, so he has to walk into the discovery, and so I do it, and this allows me to take his bishop now that the position's about to open up and it was about to be strong for the first time in the game. He takes my knight, and now I have 50 seconds on my clock. There's no way I can calculate if I can queen or if I can sneak my bishop back here and take these, or if I have time for any of that, because he's just going to push his pawns. And so I'm like, alright, I have 50 seconds. I can't calculate everything, so let me just choose one. And I chose to go for his pawns from behind. But now he gives me some checks. He brings his knight in, so it's scary for me. Very scary. I improve my bishop so that I can hunt this pawn chain. He takes with check. I just go backwards so he doesn't have a follow-up check. He brings his king in. And now I push the pawn just to try to keep his pieces distracted. He brings his king a little bit closer, even though the king can't take this, but the knight can. But because he moved the king over, now I'm playing h4 because I want to distract his king back to the other side. But he doesn't fall for it, and instead he brings his knight here. It's a good find, actually. He didn't have a choice though, because something has to attend to this pawn. I pushed the pawn because I said, okay, fine. I'm still going to tie something down, and while you do that, I'm going to try to steal your pawns. And again, I didn't calculate. I don't know if this is winning or losing. He goes to stop the pawn with the king now because he's afraid. And now this gives me the second I need to go and eat these pawns. He pushes because this looks pretty intimidating. I have to scoop pawns and maybe try to run this guy up the board. Or this guy, or this guy. That was my plan, to just have all these passed pawns and not give him time. Like, I know my king can blockade these two pawns, right? You just put it, when it pushes, you put it in between. So I needed to do what I could to distract the knight and the king. That's what I was trying to do with all these pawns. But he kept giving me checks. He kept moving forward with tempo. I go here, there's some crazy line where the knight promotes with the pawns right away. He goes for this pawn. And now I push just to make the king go as far away as possible, because I was going to lose the pawn anyway. Now I take this pawn, and now I have these two passers, and this guy's hanging. So it's tricky because white has to find the right knight square to push, otherwise it doesn't work. Now he pushes, and now this is very scary. And now I say I have to abandon the pawn, because if I take the pawn, he's just gonna check me and then jump his knight in and queen. So yeah, I'll have this pawn, but he's gonna get a queen. So I forget the pawn. I go here so that I can sack the bishop and run with the pawns. Then he goes here and gives me check. And here I mouse slipped. So in my head I was like, oh, I got this, because when I go bishop a4, he's gonna give me a check. I'm gonna blockade it, right? He's gonna give me a check with his knight, hitting my king and protecting the queen square. I'm gonna eat his pawn. He's gonna get a queen. I'm gonna take it. He's gonna take back with the knight check. I'm just gonna move my king. He's gonna have a knight and a pawn. I'm gonna have this pawn structure, and I'm gonna be completely winning. So he pushes the pawn, and instead of f7, my king went to g8. And now this, of course, loses, because when he does that same idea, you don't eat the f7 pawn. And if you don't eat the you don't eat this pawn here. And if you don't eat that pawn, he can push that with a check, and then push the other one. So when you sack, he still gets the queen. So that's exactly what happened. So now I knew that would happen, so I tried to just get him to give me time to get a queen, but it doesn't even work. But what do you do with 17 seconds in a completely losing position? See, I get my queen, but it's all for naught, because he gets a queen with check, and then I had one tempo here to do what I want before he gets a second queen, but I only have one check. And so now I just check him all over the place, because I have nothing left to do. He's about to get another queen. I try to just give as many checks as I can. Now I push, and it's just hopeless. I go for this cheapo, hoping he does some weird move, like with a knight or a king trying to troll me, and then I take the queen. But he checkmates me, of course. And so unfortunate that I lost, but time trouble. You can't. It's so hard to play in games like that. Even with minutes on your clock, forget time trouble. So I'm just looking for big issues, really big decisions that were bad. Yeah, I mean, yeah, b5 here is better, but 97 is not like a bad decision. And yeah, it's not that I don't dislike my decisions. It's just that at moments there were just better ideas and better options, like sacking here and pushing a4, which a4 I was trying to do the whole time, and it didn't work. Like the 2 or 3 times I checked, and then I didn't check again. The sack on c4 I didn't even I don't think I even looked at, which is kind of crazy because it's staring at you. So yeah, it's more of like missing good moves as opposed to making bad moves. Yeah, and this was all actually really pretty brilliant strategy to go for, because I thought I might be losing in this position. Turns out I was winning with king f7, but alright, good game. We go down, but in the next 2 videos we actually play the same person twice. One time we win, one time we lose, so spoiler alert. Get ready for that one. We keep climbing to 2100.